I travel the world and claim that there might be four things that could change the world. And I know that is a very huge phrase, but I honestly believe that collaboration and the way that we work together can be improved at so many levels. Now, when I'm talking about collaboration, we have been studying more than 35,000 collaborations and negotiations throughout a number of years. And we have clearly identified four things that need to be fulfilled in order for us to be more successful. Now, my mission in life is simply to improve the way we negotiate. That means the way we engage in relationship, the way we conduct business, and the way, obviously, we do negotiate. And I want to share these four items with all of you right now. Now, unprioritized, I know that one of the first things we need to focus on is choosing a strategy. So many organizations out there in the real world don't have an official negotiation strategy. They have not even been thinking about what could be a negotiation strategy. And we need to identify, obviously, whether we want to negotiate in zero sum, whether we want to negotiate in partnership, or whether we want to negotiate in smartnership. And that is three very different approaches in how to negotiate. When we are talking about zero sum, obviously, we can be very successful. I know lots and lots of corporations who are extremely successful in conducting zero sum. And zero sum, to summarize very quickly, is obviously I'm winning at the expense of the counterpart, or the counterpart is winning at my expense. So one side's progress is happening at the expense of the counterpart. You can certainly be successful in zero sum. Now, I would argue at any time that you would be more successful in partnership. And partnership is obviously a little bit superior to zero sum because in partnership, the parties has actually acknowledged there's something called economics. They have acknowledged there's some value that could be agreed on. They may lack a little bit about openness and trust and may not have agreed on rules of the game, but they very often become mutually more successful than in zero sum. But if you want to utilize the full cake, the whole pie, we need to move into smartnership. And in smartnership, obviously, we can work on the total picture. We can work on economics. We have agreed the rules of the game. We have focused on all the variables. And I can actually make progress and be successful, not at the expense of the counterpart. And I am willing and happy to assist my counterpart becoming more successful, but not at my expense. So the choice of strategy is one of the four essential items that we need to focus on in order to become more successful. The second item I have up here is what we call trust currency. And trust currency, as you can hear, is just two words that I put together, trust and currency. And the reason I've done that is because they're so much related. Because if we have a high level of trust, our transactional cost will go down and our profit will go up. On the other hand, if trust is low, our transactional cost will go up and our profit will go down. So trust is essential in becoming more successful in negotiation. Now, there's an American professor by the name of Yankolovich who have written a book called Profit with Honor. Great book, I would recommend that. And he's been studying trust as well. And what he actually identified, as you can see, is that trust was very high in the 50s and it was very high in the late 90s. But today it's actually recorded to be the lowest level that we have ever recorded. And that is actually terrible news because back to what I said, if we have a low level of trust, we are financially less successful than if we have a high level of trust. So trust currency is really one of the four essential items that we need to focus on. Look at this keystone picture and this small movie I'm showing you right here. If we go back to the Roman Empire, the Roman engineering was amazing 1,000 years ago because they knew that in order to create the arch, there was one stone that was actually holding the whole arch together. And as you saw in this small clip right here, if we remove that keystone, the whole arch is actually going to collapse. What is interesting is today we're actually building the exact same way that the Romans were doing thousands of years ago because that engineering is just brilliant. And remember that trust is equal to the keystone. If you remember trust in any kind of relationship, you actually remove that keystone and the arch could collapse and you move into zero sum. Then we need to establish the rules of the game. And that means we need to negotiate on how to negotiate. What kind of strategy are you going to work on? Are you going to work on smartnership? Are you going to work on partnership? Or are you going to work in zero sum? You don't have to use those words when you open up negotiation, but you certainly have to agree with the counterpart. What are we going to do today? Are we going to play chess? Are we going to play tennis? Could you imagine that the parties are confused what they're going to do? So one side is sitting there with a tennis racket ready to play tennis, and the other side of the table is thinking they're playing chess, and they set up the chessboard and are ready to play chess. That's going to be an interesting game, isn't it? One side playing tennis, the other side playing chess. So we have to agree, what game are we going to play? That's the third of the essential items we have to agree on before we actually move into negotiation. And the fourth and the final one is the financial side of it, because that is the concept of negoeconomics. Negoeconomics is an award-winning mathematical model that is basically showing that we can utilize up to additional 42% value in any negotiation. And as this pie chart out here shows you, what we know on average is that the purchaser in most negotiations is only getting 19%. That is 19 million out of a 100 million deal in total. We are seeing that the selling side of on the table, in average, are getting 39% of the value. So in a $100 million deal, that will obviously be 39 million. And the interesting part, as you remember from Module 1, is that up to 42% is left on the conference table, without neither of the parties have identified that potential, capitalized that potential, or utilized that potential. So negoeconomics have to be thrown in and used in every single negotiation, because that is where we can create additional value without the counterpart paying, and we can secure the counterpart is getting additional value without you are paying. Now look at this small model up here. What we know in general is that we have what we call the traditional room for negotiation. And in this case up here, we have the seller and a buyer. Whatever they're negotiating about is not really important. But what we know up here is that we have a buyer. And the buyer in this case has a maximum of 150%. That is 150,000, sorry. That's the maximum they can pay. On the other side of the table, we have a sales rep. And the sales rep in this case have a limit threshold, in this case of 120. So the traditional room for negotiation is obviously the difference between the 150 and the 120. In this case, that is 30,000. So obviously the two parties could reach an agreement because there is room for negotiation. But that's not the real room for negotiation, because the real room for negotiation is the combination of the traditional room for negotiation, the 30,000, plus the potential of negoeconomics. So if we are able to create and utilize negoeconomics, three things will happen. The room up here for negotiation will increase, negotiation will become easier, and you can win without the counterpart paying, and the counterpart can win without your paying. So remember, the 42% value is really of interest and is something that we should look for regardless what kind of negotiation we might be involved in.